Going to go ahead and call the September 3rd, 2019 meeting of the Whitefish City Council to order. Thanks for attending this evening, and I'll go a little out of the ordinary and ask Richard to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Richard. We'll move on to item 3 of our agenda, which is communications from the public. We do have 3 public hearings for this evening. If you're here to speak on those hearings, please wait until those specific hearings are called. Otherwise, now is your opportunity to address the council. Any public comment tonight? Any public comment? Not seeing any. How about any volunteer board reports from the audience? Not seeing any. Richard.
Normally, the bike ped would have met today, but because of the holiday yesterday and no city council meeting, the ever-popular bike ped committee will meet at 8:30 next Monday, right here in City Hall.
Great, thanks very much. Any additional volunteer board reports from the council? Not seeing any. We'll move on to item 5, which is our consent agenda. Any changes or additions to the August 19th meeting minutes, or can I have a motion for approval? Frank.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
A correction to the minutes, if I may.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that would be on page 62, at the very bottom of the page. And it says in good fail, change fail to faith.
Thank you, Richard. Duly noted, the change to the August 19th meeting minutes. Further discussion on the consent agenda? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Councilor Williams. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign. And that does carry unanimous, didn't you?
No.
Oh, you didn't?
But I'll second it.
Frank seconded.
No, he moved.
Frank moved.
I saw his friend.
We'll have to go back to the tapes.
I pulled back.
Katie did it.
I thought it
Yeah,
was
sure,
Katie.
I did it.
Yeah. Thanks. We'll move on to item 6 of our agenda, which is our public hearings for the evening. We'll start with item 6A, which is consideration of a request from Stuart Bray for a conditional use permit to construct an accessory apartment located at 19 Minnesota Avenue. The property is zoned WR2, which is our 2-family residential district.
I'm over here. It's okay. So the applicant is requesting a conditional use permit to construct an accessory apartment behind a proposed single-family residence. Recently, a building permit was issued for the single-family dwelling, but currently the property is vacant. The accessory apartment will be located above a proposed 2-car garage at the rear of the subject property. The building will meet all setback, size, and height requirements and will access off the alley on the east side of the property. The property is approximately 6,500 square feet. It's surrounded by residential uses on all sides. It's zoned WR2, which is our 2-family limited residential district, and the growth policy designation is urban, which does correspond to the WR2. It's connected, or will be connected to all city services and utilities. We did mail a notice to adjacent landowners within 150 feet of the subject parcel on July 26th. We also emailed advisory agencies and placed a legal in the Whitefish pilot on July 31st. I did receive 2 comments that were after the planning board packet went out, but prior to the meeting. Those were included as part of your packet for this evening as well. So we do review the request based off of the criteria required for consideration of a conditional use permit within our zoning regulations, and I'll just kind of hit the highlights of them. The proposal is consistent with the purpose and intent of the regulations. There are special provision requirements for an accessory apartment, and this project does appear to meet all of those requirements at this time. The use, as I said, will be accessory to a single-family home that is currently in the works to be built, and adequate parking will be provided. The accessory apartment will meet or exceed the setbacks required for the accessory structure, and this will be confirmed at the time of building permit review. And the lot does comply with both the minimum lot size and lot width requirements of the WR2 zoning. As I said, the garage with the accessory apartment will access from a public alley on the east side of the property, which connects to both Woodland Place and Edgewood Place. Both the alley and Woodland Place and Edgewood Place are publicly maintained roadways, and so there is adequate access to the subject property. The zoning regulations requires 2 parking spaces for the single-family dwelling and then 1 additional off-street space provided for the accessory apartment. The proposed lot does appear to provide adequate space to accommodate all parking needs on site within the proposed garage and then additional room adjacent to the proposed accessory building. And then any new driveways or parking areas are required to be paved under our current regulations. The property is currently served by municipal water and sewer, and these connections will be reviewed by the Public Works Department at the time of a building permit. Additionally, the stormwater drainage will be reviewed by the Public Works Department at the time a building permit application is submitted as well. Traffic impacts are anticipated to be minimal since the property will have a single-family residence and is located within an existing neighborhood with similar uses. No additional noise or vibration is anticipated to be generated, as well as no smoke, fumes, gas, or other odors that are out of the norm for a residential structure. The property will have to meet the lot coverage and height standards for the zoning, and the proposed structure will be accessory, as I said, to the single-family use, and is similar to existing adjacent residential uses in the neighborhood. In order to meet the reduced setbacks for accessory structures, the garage must be completely detached from the existing single-family residence, and that will reduce the overall bulk and scale of the proposed development. The existing neighborhood is predominantly single-family residential. The proposed use is not expected to impact or change the character of the neighborhood, and the density is not out of character with this area. So staff did recommend approval of the conditional use application, subject to 11 conditions in the staff report. The planning board met on August 15th and considered the request. No members of the public spoke at the meeting, and those draft minutes were attached as part of your packet with the additional comments that came in. Following the hearing, the planning board did recommend unanimously to approve the request, and so I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much, Bailey. Any questions for Bailey on her staff report? Any questions? Thanks, Bailey. I assume the applicant's representative is not here, so I will call a public hearing on this item. Is there any public comment this evening? Any public comments? Not seeing any. I'll close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for a motion. Andy.
If I can get my mic on here, I would move to approve WCUP 19-14 findings of fact, staff report, subject to the 11 conditions of approval as recommended to us by our own esteemed Whitefish Planning Board on their August 15, 2019 meeting.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Ryan. Further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, and those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. Michelle, which brings us quickly to item 6B, our second public hearing of the evening, which is a consideration of a request from David Radati of Mindful Designs for a conditional use permit to construct an accessory apartment located at 1455 Barclay Lane. The property is zoned WR1, which again is our one-family residential district. Dave.
Good evening. So that's, I think, page 191 of your packet. So yeah, this request is for an accessory apartment above an attached garage as part of a new single-family resident at 517 square feet apartment. There's an existing triplex or formerly existing triplex that was non-conforming on that site that has been removed. So the site's currently vacant. So the apartment's going to be over a garage that's attached by a covered patio to the main house, and it's accessed by an external staircase that's behind the garage. The lot's about 15,000 square feet. It's zone WR1, which allows accessory apartments. We did have one public comment that came by mail that had some concern about stormwater runoff. There's an existing storm drain that flows to Whitefish Lake, so we added some additional conditions at Public Works' request. As far as the review of a conditional use permit criteria, it does comply with our conditional use permit criteria as far as the performance standards for accessory apartments. Complies with the WR1 zoning district and the standards within that. The lot's an adequate size. The permitted lot coverage is 35%, and that will only be 16.5% lot coverage on that particular site. There's no environmental constraints. I did mention the stormwater is across Barkley Lane from the lake, so it's not on the lake. But it does have a stormwater drainage, as I mentioned, so some additional erosion control stuff will be required. As far as parking goes, they're showing adequate parking on the site. We are going to add a special condition that at least 3 off-street parking spaces be provided. So that it does meet our requirements as far as the quality and functionality of the development. The number of parking spaces doesn't impact traffic or circulation. And all utilities will be underground. There's existing utilities to the site. As far as public services, they are available to the site. It is a formerly developed site. There's not going to be any additional traffic generation or other impacts to the neighborhood associated with that. And as far as the context of the neighborhood, it does fit in with the context as far as bulk and scale of the building. It's compatible with the surrounding uses in the neighborhood. Staff did recommend approval, subject to 12 conditions of approval. A couple of those conditions I'll mention, again, erosion control, best management practices must be in place and inspected by Public Works, and must remain in place until the site's adequately stabilized with vegetation. And then the additional language was filter fabric for the drain inlets must be Ultratech Drain Guard 9217 or an approved equal due to its location near Whitefish Lake. Again, the off-street parking space condition, which I mentioned earlier, the driveways and parking areas must be paved. All stormwater generated must be retained on site. And then we do have that condition as part of the conditional use permit criteria for accessory apartments that the property be deed restricted so that it may only be rented if the owners maintain permanent residence in the primary structure. This did go to the planning board. On August 15th, they met, considered the request. No one came up and spoke at the public hearing, and then the planning board did recommend unanimously to approve it. And I would be glad to answer any questions if you have any.
Thanks, Dave. Any questions from the council on Dave's staff report? Any questions? Thanks, Dave. We did advertise for a public hearing on item 6B of the agenda, and we'll hold that public hearing now. Is the applicant's representative here? Public comments. Is there any public testimony this evening? I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for discussion or a motion. Andy.
Guess I can do it again here. I would move to approve WCUP 19-15, adopting the findings of fact, staff report, 12 conditions of approval as recommended to us by the Whitefish Planning Board on August 15, 2019.
Thanks, Andy. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Melissa. Further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, and those opposed, like sign, and that again carries unanimously. Michelle. We will move on to item 6C, which is our only ordinance this evening, which will be ordinance 19-19, an ordinance rezoning 2 parcels annexed into city limits located at 6045 Highway 93 South. The property is currently zoned County B4/HO, which is the county's secondary business with highway overlay. And the request is for a conversion to WB2, which is our secondary business district. Hillary.
Hello, good evening. So this 5.4 acre parcel, as you can see, is at the northeast corner of Highway 93 and Highway 40. It was annexed into the city on July 1st. And as a result of the annexation, the city zoning needs to be assigned. So this is a request from the city for rezoning, and the most equivalent zoning district to the county B4 is our WB2 zoning district. This is the district that's intended, as you know, to provide for retail sales and service that are characterized by a need for large display or parking areas, large storage areas, and outdoor commercial amusement or recreation. The property also, as you know, is currently vacant. And the growth policy's future land use map designates the parcel as suburban residential. Applicable zoning districts for suburban residential are county residential, suburban residential, and estate residential. However, the surrounding zoning and land uses are primarily commercial highway. There are some residences in the area, but they're slowly transitioning to more of a commercial setting because of the high volume highways. Just the only really relevant finding of fact is that because WB2 is actually not consistent with the growth policy designation of suburban residential, but because it's already zoned county B4, the WB2 is the most equivalent zoning district that we have. And also, before the county had the zoning, it was in the planning donut, it was also WB2. So this is consistent with how the property has been zoned in the past. The August Planning Board meeting, the landowner spoke, but no other public got up to speak. And the Planning Board unanimously approved or recommended approval of the zone change. If you have any questions, let me know.
Thanks, Hillary. Any questions for Hillary? Any questions? Richard?
In looking at the planning board minutes, there was some discussion about how to make that corner beautiful now that the majority of the trees were cut off of it. And the person making the proposal said, well, they would put up a sign saying, "Welcome to Whitefish." And it seems to me that "Welcome to Whitefish" is, and unless I misinterpreted the notes from the minutes from the planning board, is there more that they could,
first of
should,
all,
would do?
I would just clarify that the city is the applicant in this case, so this property has been annexed into the city, so we need to make a zoning designation.
Okay.
That's part of it. But also, I know that the property owner has met with representatives of the city to talk about how that edge of the property could be used, and there are some discussions that are happening, but I haven't been privy to those conversations, so.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Not seeing any. Thanks, Hillary.
Yep.
We did advertise for a public hearing on what will be our own ordinance 19-19, and we'll hold that public hearing now. Any public comment this evening on this item? Any public testimony? Not seeing any. I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for a motion. Frank.
I would move to approve ordinance 1919, an ordinance rezoning two parcels annexed into the city limits located at 6045 Highway 93 South, Zone County B4, Secondary Business and Highway Overlay, and to WB2 Secondary Business District.
I'll
Is there-
second.
Seconded by Councilor Williams. Further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, and those opposed, like sign, and that carries unanimously as well. Michelle? Thanks, Hillary. That brings us pretty quickly to item 7, communications from Craig Works, our Public Works Director. Item 7A, which is a consideration to award the contract for the Monaghan Road Project Phase 1 to Knife River in the amount of $399,614. Craig?
All right, 3 public hearings in like 10 minutes. There's no pressure here. So we have, and I'll mention that C.R. Leesinger is here as well from Morrison Merrily. Should I stumble on this, he will help me out, I'm sure. But we have completed the bidding for the first phase of the Monaghan Road reconstruction project. As I'm sure everyone's aware, this is an existing gravel roadway. The first segment extends from Vorman Road to essentially the entrance to the Parks building about 1,500 feet to the south. The proposed road improvement project will provide asphalt surfacing, safety and drainage improvements, and utility coordination. The Monaghan Road, this section of Monaghan Road is classified as a major collector by the Montana Department of Transportation in their urban area maps. And the reconstruction of the roadway was discussed in our 2009 Whitefish Transportation Plan, so it is an important project. One of the major goals of this project is to bring the roadway into compliance with current City of Whitefish engineering standards, which we are doing by increasing the width of the road, including a paved surface of 24 feet, 2-foot gravel shoulders, and swales on either side of the roadway. A shared use path is also being designed, which will connect Creekwood to the Trailview shared use path, which is currently under construction as part of that subdivision. The path design is not completed and it needs to be presented to the Bike Ped committee, so we'll either be bidding this as a future phase of the project or adding it through a change order a little bit down the road. One of the challenges encountered during the design of the project is how to save the large diameter ponderosa pine tree, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, near the intersection of Montague and Vorman. The proximity of this tree to the roadway makes excavation a concern and presents some safety issues on a rural roadway such as this. An option was explored during the design to shift the roadway. However, this became difficult and it looked to be pretty cost prohibitive based on right-of-way acquisition that would be required. The final design of the project did include removal of the tree, and so the numbers that you have before you do include the removal of that pine tree. However, since then, we've come up with a solution that we think is going to be palatable to council. This solution will essentially involve the installation of about 200 feet of curb and gutter along the west side of Montague Road past the tree so that we don't have to reconstruct the swale where the tree currently exists. There will be some excavation required to install this curb and gutter, but I don't anticipate much impact to the root system of the tree, so I think it is a win-win. We've talked to the contractor about this, and we anticipate about a $5,000 change to add that curb and gutter. There's cost in the project to remove the tree, which we obviously won't be spending, and then about $30 a foot roughly to install that curb and gutter. We opened bids for the project on August 26th. There were 2 contractors that submitted bids, and Knife River was determined to be the lowest responsible bidder. Their bid was $399,614. We know that Knife River is a reputable contractor. They've completed a number of projects of similar size and scope for the city in the past. Phase 1 of this project is proposed to be funded by the city's Bridge and Road Safety and Accountability Act, the BARSA fund, or more popularly known as gas tax. We've also allocated some funding in the FY20 budget from stormwater. The total budget is $325,000 from the city, and we also have an agreement with the developer of the Trailview subdivision. I should say a condition of approval of that subdivision. They pay 1/3 of the project cost, so I think that we'll be okay. Depending on the final design of the path and the final negotiated cost of the curb and gutter, there could potentially be some additional funding required from the budget, but I don't anticipate that to be the case. So based on all that, it is the recommendation of the Public Works Department that council accept the bids and award the project to Knife River in the amount of $399,614. We will work with finance on a budget amendment later this fiscal year, should that be required.
Thanks, Craig. Any questions for Craig on his staff report? Richard?
Just a comment, if I may.
Sure.
I really appreciate the efforts that you and Maria have gone to find ways to preserve that historic tree. I really appreciate that. I don't know who it was that put the tree root protection zone around to the west of the tree, but I thought that was a really nice touch and greatly appreciated. So thanks for taking the extra time to make that happen. I think that is a significant tree to our community, and it'll outlive all of us, hopefully.
Yeah, the park staff did put that fencing in before construction began on the Trailview project, so that north end of Trailview has been deeded as parkland, and so I think it was Philip and Jen probably that took the extra effort to save the tree, so for Craig to come along and cut the tree down wouldn't have looked too good. So yeah, I think we were able to work together on a solution that I think will work well.
Thanks, Craig. More out of curiosity, maybe this is a question for CR if you can't answer it, Craig, but I've been out in this area in the spring when it's experiencing rain on snow melt on frozen ground, and that's a major stormwater conveyance that Montague's going to be crossing. I'm just curious what size CMP or hydraulic structure was sized for that drainage.
Yeah, I believe it's a 24-inch, or did we upsize it to?
Do you mind coming to the podium? Thank you, just for the record. Just name and address, please, here.
C.R. Leesinger, 125 Schoolhouse Loop, Kalispell. Yeah, the question was about the culverts, culvert size. The culverts that cross the road that we designed are 28-inch by 20-inch elliptical culverts. And the drainage typically, it runs to either that swale on the city park on the north-hand side, or it runs also to the Trailview storm on the south side.
Right.
Is where the water runs to.
Similar size pipes for both locations?
Yeah, a little bit bigger on the crossings.
Okay.
The existing culverts were not flowing in the right direction originally, so we had to redesign kind of the grades and the slopes to make things work a little bit better too, so.
Okay, great. Just more out of curiosity than anything, so appreciate that. Further questions, comments? Andy?
Yeah, just one quick question on the money, Craig. If I read that correctly on the 1/3, then, so our part of it's 266,000 and Trailview is 133,000, is that correct?
Yep, that's about right.
Okay.
Further comments, questions, or can I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to award the contract for the Monaghan Road Project Phase 1 to Knife River in the amount of $399,614.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Williams. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. Thanks for coming tonight, Sierra. Appreciate it. Thanks, Craig. We'll move on to item 8A. You have Adam's written report and close with the packet. Any questions for Adam on his report this week? Adam, anything additional to report on?
Yeah, I think the work sessions, you might see some jockeying around there. I know the Housing Authority meeting last Thursday, they'd like to come and show the council some of the implementation things that they've been working on. And so I think they want to be at that first meeting in October. And then I know, Hillary's not here, but I know that Dixon Consulting, I think, is planning on being here for that second meeting in October. So just so you know, you might see some shifting around of those work sessions as we try to fit all that in. That's all I have. Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks, Adam. Richard?
Can you, since I wasn't able to make it, and I don't know who all did from council, an update on how the groundbreaking went for?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the Alpenglow Apartments on August 27th at 1 o'clock, there was over 40 people in attendance. The mayor made some great comments on behalf of the city. There was lots of cheering and clapping, and I know Al and Lisa Stinson were there, and they were lauded heavily, and so, I mean, I thought it went really well. They were even doing some work while we were there. I was a little worried when the first dump truck came in and started kicking up dust, and I was like, oh no. But it worked out well. The dust didn't drift our way, and it ended up just being a nice event that lasted maybe 45 minutes, but it was good.
Good, thanks.
Further questions for Adam? Thanks, Adam. We will end the evening with communications from the mayor and city councilors. Richard, do you want to give us a quick update on the appointments made during the work session this evening?
Sure.
If you don't mind.
Yeah, during the work session, I had the honor of making the mayoral appointment of Marin McClary, or Marnie, for the Housing Authority. And the council approved Tara Zimmerman for the Board of Adjustments and approved Nancy Schuber for the Lakeshore Protection Committee.
Thank you. Comments tonight?
Oh, me again? I'd just like to keep Burlington Northern, or keep have Burlington Northern keep us in the loop and encourage them to keep producing some press releases about events at Roundhouse Park. I'm still waiting to see or hear about any sort of a rehab plan for that park besides just importing soil, specifically how they were going to deal with the trees that were removed and their weed control plan. That's it.
Thanks, Richard. Andy?
It's kind of a BNSF-related thing, and I don't have full information, but I was contacted by the legislative or governmental rep for the union for the Burlington Northern here in town, and the railroad is trying to get legislation passed and reduce crews to one person on all trains moving through communities. The state has barred legislation prohibiting that, but most states have. The BN's been very successful at lobbying state legislators in doing that. So what the local legislative operatives are trying to do is they're trying to get municipalities that have large rail operations in town to pass some kind of non-binding resolution supporting two-person train crews. Obviously, that's something to be in, and we're trying to work with them. They're probably not going to be happy about that, but I don't have all the full information. When I have that, I'll get it out to everybody, and we can take a look at it and see if it was something we're interested in. But their argument, essentially, in a nutshell, is that yes, the technology for smart train technology will be there at some point in the future. It's currently not, and given the amount of things that move through our rail yard on a daily basis, it's probably good to have two sets of eyes watching and running the train. So anyway, once I get that, I'll get that to everybody, and they have some sample binding resolutions that other communities have passed throughout the country, and so we can take a look at that.
Great.
So, and that's all I have.
Great. Thanks, Andy. Ryan?
Nothing.
Thanks, Ryan. Katie?
Couple things. I hate to beat a dead horse, but I was out at Cowgirl Coffee this morning and watched two bikers swerve into the road because there was a giant patch of gravel on the entrance closest to Cowgirl Coffee for the quarry on the bike path. So it was fixed, and now it's not fixed, and now it's kind of a giant mess. So I don't know if, Craig, you could contact them to see what their plan of action is. But it was a mother towing her kids, and then it was kind of a scary ordeal watching her swerve, and then a car came kind of close to her. Secondly, on a happier note, the Hootenanny for Whitefish Trails was a huge success. Thank you to the mayor and Andy for pouring beer and for the city staff who volunteered their time. A very large amount of money was raised for the Whitefish Trail. All the tips made at both bars were donated to the Whitefish Trail, and it was a very large sum. So people were feeling happy and giving their money, and so we thank you. So that's all.
Thanks, Katie. Frank?
Nothing this evening, thank you.
Melissa?
No comments.
I have a BNS. Richard?
Well, sorry, one other thing. It's apple season, and I think it's time to encourage anybody who's listening or watching or reading their Whitefish pilot that it's time to pick up their apples to keep the bears in the woods rather than in the city.
Good point. Just a couple things. Wanted to give a big shout out to Maria and your crew. I've been observing the bike ped wayfinding signs that have gone up in the recent, couple weeks, and I think they look fantastic. I think the content, the look, they're consistent with our street wayfinding sign design. So just kudos to you and your department for a job well done. I think they're a great addition to our bike ped trail system. Speaking of BNSF, this evening during our work session, it reminded me that we haven't really had an update from BNSF on a potential quiet zone development at Birch Point. The last I heard, I know you, Adam, and Craig had met with BNSF officials, and they had indicated as part of their Highline improvements, they are going to be looking at Birch Point for an upgrade to a quiet zone. Anything new to report on that? And I bring that up because as a backstop to funding, which we've hit ourselves against the wall with for 15 years on funding for Birch Point, it was always my impression that we would look at tax increment financing as a last resort to at least meet our local match, so to speak. So I bring that up for that purpose, given that was the topic of our work session this evening.
Yeah, a couple of things, and Craig can step in and correct me if I'm in error too. What the state and BNSF are trying to do is they're trying to put the arms at all the intersections along the High Line route. We're asking if we can actually change that project to a quiet zone, whereas we would have to pay the additional cost from going from what they're doing to a quiet zone, which is typically just infrastructure north and south of that route. We might have to work with them a little bit on some of the wider things, because I'm sure that if we're going to want to do a quiet zone, they were probably also going to want a bike ped crossing right there with it. So there may be some infrastructure upgrades that we're going to have to do that. The other thing is they were trying to get it on their work plan, is that what they call it, I think, Craig, for next year? And I think they were able to get it on their work plan, and I think maybe the next step is funding. So I'm not sure the state's process on that.
Yeah, right now, the Birch Point crossing, the upgrade just to include mechanical arms is on the work plan for their current fiscal year. It's not at a priority quite yet that it's going to be funded, so we're working on encouraging MDT to increase the priority of that. I've also had several conversations with the Federal Railroad Administration, the FRA, who ultimately needs to approve any quiet zone. I've submitted to them kind of some conceptual plans that were actually put together about 7 or 8 years ago by the city, and they're reviewing those as we speak. So I'm optimistic that we'll at least be able to continue discussions with FRA and with BNSF and with MDT. The question really becomes when the project will be built, but it's definitely got legs, and we're a lot further along than we were this time last year. So I think by them nominating this project as just a safety project, it's sort of rekindled the conversation.
So would their proposal and scope include, I mean, I understand the mechanical arms, the signaling, would that necessarily make it a quiet zone?
No. In order to become a quiet zone, we'd need to put a traffic barrier in. Typically, those are 4-foot medians that run about 100 feet either side of the crossing. That's what we did at East 2nd Street. I believe State Park just has raised bollards, the plastic bollards, but I'm not sure that those are accepted as a barrier anymore. So I think it will likely include a median on either side as well.
Do you have any idea on what the cost to upgrade to a quiet zone would be?
We had some...
Assuming all those other improvements are done?
Yeah, we had some preliminary cost estimates from a while back, but the regulations have changed, and so I wanted to get some confirmation from the FRA on whether we're going in the right direction or not before we actually put a cost estimate to it. But in round numbers, I think we're talking about $100,000.
So with that said, given their schedule and our schedule with the expiration of the TIF, is this something that we can prioritize, and would we be positioning ourselves timely enough to dedicate some TIF funds to finalize this upgrade that we've been talking about now for 15 plus years?
I had never heard that this was being thought of for TIF funding before.
Maybe it just was in my mind.
And I know Dana was just looking on the TIF map, and it
Yeah.
doesn't look like it's in the TIF.
It's not in the TIF.
It doesn't appear to be, no.
Okay. Could we declare it blighted and bring it into the TIF?
Into the new TIF?
Yeah, I mean, the other issue that we have is Birch Point Drive is the portion of I believe the south approach grade is county owned, yet the city maintains it, if I'm not mistaken. Isn't that right, Craig? That short section of road coming into the crossing? Because that's the reason we couldn't pursue an SID, is because it technically wasn't property owned by the city.
I guess on the south side, yeah, I would say that's correct. Go ahead.
One of the things to think about is while TIF might not be available, when we look at the next year's budget, you will have additional revenue if you continue to levy at the same amount. So you have 1.4 million. Obviously, we know some of that's already earmarked. It doesn't mean that you couldn't earmark a portion of that for that project that 1 year. So I think that would be probably the funds to look at, since it doesn't appear to be in the TIF district right now.
Okay.
And if you were to add it to a TIF district, it'd be way down the road, so.
And I think the state really wants to do this. I think the question is it going to get in next year or the year after? Or even beyond that, I don't know. But if it happens next year, there's a possibility that it could be, but if it happens next year, we won't be able to put it into the new TIF because the project will probably be already done. But if it ends up going a year later, we might be able to add that in as a TIF eligible
Okay,
project. But
okay. Well, I appreciate
yeah, I'll have to look
the
and see if we can-
alternatives, you know, and I just think it's something that we need to keep on our radar because we've been
Absolutely.
talking about it now for close to 2 decades. I think it's an important project for that side
Yep.
of town. I think that's all I had. Anything further from staff? Adam?
Did you want to provide any more feedback on the lease for
Thank you.
BNSF on Baker Avenue?
Further discussion on our work session agenda item this evening regarding the underpass, Baker Avenue underpass, and whether or not we're comfortable prioritizing the 1.3 million towards that improvement in the event that we can't secure a lease that extends beyond 10 years or a lease that is automatically renewable. Frank, any comments on this? I know you shared some during our work session, but I'd like to hear from the other counselors and kind of close this loop on our TIF discussion.
You know, I think I don't have much more to say other than I think if we're going to spend that kind of money, we have to have something longer than a 10-year lease or easement or whatever you want to call it. I just can't see us spending any money. I think there are options that might be available to us in terms of how we meet their policy of only 10 years, and yet if there's a way to make those renewable at our option on 10, 15, 20 more years, that might make it palatable, but I think we need to get something that extends that to spend that kind of money.
Thanks, Frank. Further comments on that subject? Is everyone generally in favor of that condition on the use of this fund? Okay.
So that I'm clear, if they will not go longer than 10-year leases, we will not be doing the project.
Not with TIF, no.
Excuse me? That's my understanding, just
All
looking
right,
at
just
the
wanted to clarify.
nodding heads up here, so. Thanks, Adam, for the reminder. Anything else? Staff? Craig?
Yeah, I just want to touch on the quarry real quick. About a month ago, when we were running into issues with them properly detouring the bike path and having the proper signage and traffic control and all of that, I told them they needed to open the bike path immediately and cease and desist any work in the right-of-way until after Labor Day. They still have to finish the north approach for the subdivision or for the project, which includes some considerable asphalt removal and paving and concrete and bike path repairs. I told them they could not do any of that work until I had a schedule and a traffic control plan, which I haven't seen yet. So what remains is definitely some gravel areas where asphalt transitions to gravel, and there was some temporary pavement that was done. So I would anticipate sometime, you know, perhaps before the next council meeting, that north section of the bike path is going to have to be closed again and detoured around so that they can finish those improvements. So I can keep Adam apprised of that so he can let you guys know, and we could do some public announcement of that prior to it happening.
Those are private roads, correct? Or public roads privately maintained as part of the subdivision approval?
That section of road, that north entrance is entirely private, but the bike path is public.
So instead of cutting pedestrians and bicyclists into the Wisconsin Avenue right-of-way, can we direct them through the subdivision?
Yeah, and that's what I've requested, is that
You did,
they
okay.
detour through the subdivision or through the, it's kind of tricky with the new sign that
Sure,
they put in, but
sure.
we'll make sure that that happens as opposed to going out into the street.
Great, appreciate that. I did send out an email, one final note, I think to the council regarding, Jim Stack sent me an invite to send on to you regarding his open house on this Thursday night. I believe it's from 4 to 7 at Stack Financial Management. If you plan to attend, we probably just need to stagger our attendance so there's no quorum issues. Is anyone planning on attending at this point besides myself? No?
I might.
Maybe? No? No? Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
Ride my bike out there.
Maybe just let me know, Frank, if we have two sures and I'm a sure, then just let me know, and if I need to stagger, I'm happy to. Okay. Great, anything further from council? We are adjourned.